Hello, if you watch the Junior production, and we flew our flag for a little bit at the beginning. I wish I was fancy and could do neat intros, but been flying my little flag just inside my house. I have nowhere to put it outside. Been very prayerful, a little bit somber, and I'm sure just like the rest of you guys. And I had more to say about it in the Junior reading that I just did, but y'all can look at that if you want to. I'm going to get right into Little Women. I just decided to go ahead with the reading just because I knew that, or I figured the little squirrels might be missing us if we are missing their story. And if you don't mind going back to the Junior Squirrel Squad, I know a lot of you are listening to those two, and there ain't nothing wrong with that. Nothing at all. I mentioned a lady who was a storyteller and probably didn't finish my thought. She was a great storyteller. I mentioned that that was always something I kind of wanted to do, was tell stories to not only children, but big folk too. We all like to hear stories. The manager loves to hear stories. My goodness, she'd rather hear funny family stories than get on her phone. And that's saying something. Like Miss Linda Jean said, I'm in a place of honor. She didn't say that, but I told her I felt very honored. She said, well, Katerina, I've beat out Paw Patrol. She said, Granny Sweet, you've beat out Paw Patrol. And like that was really something, because she says little Katerina gets in her car seat. And I guess they give her a phone or whatever so she can listen, puts on her headphones, and she says she'll just talk along with me or exclaim things. I just wish I could be a fly on the wall or see that. I would love to see that little soul. Anyway, for the big souls, let's smile a little bit. It's like I say, I've been kind of in a just thoughtful and prayerful mood. I didn't know anybody personally that passed or was a family of it, but that didn't mean anything. I mean, just go back and look at what I said. I won't go through that again, but anyway. Little Women, we're on chapter 5, and I do not know that I will get through it all, but we'll see. I love it when I can keep the chapter since we're doing a playlist, but if I can, I can't. Be neighborly. What in the world are you going to do now, Joe? Asked Meg one snowy afternoon as her sister came clumping through the hall in rubber boots, old sack, and hood, with a broom in one hand and a shovel in the other. Going out for exercise, answered Joe with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. I should think... Oops. Let's see. I should think 2 long walks this morning would have been enough. It's cold and dull out, and I advise you to stay warm and dry by the fire as I do, said Meg with a shiver. Never take advice. Can't keep still all day and not being a pussycat. I don't like to doze by the fire. I like adventures, and I'm going to find some. Meg went back to toast her feet and read Ivanhoe, and Joe began to dig paths with great energy. The snow was light, and with her broom, she soon swept a path. I can't just have one earring. Weird like that. With her broom, she soon swept a path all around the garden for Beth to walk in when the sun came out, and the invalid dolls, talking about her sisters, needed air. Now the garden separated the Marches' house from that of Mr. Laurie's grandfather. Both stood in a suburb of the city, which was still country-like, with groves and lawns, large gardens, and quiet streets. A low hedge parted the 2 estates. On one side was an old brown house, looking rather bare and shabby, robbed of the vines that in summer covered its walls, and the flowers which then surrounded it. On the other side was a stately stone mansion, plainly betokening every sort of comfort and luxury, from the big coach house and the well-kept grounds to the conservatory, and the glimpses of lovely things when caught between the rich curtains. Yet it seemed a lonely, lifeless sort of house, for no children frolicked on the lawn, no motherly face ever smiled at the windows, and few people went in and out except the old gentleman and his grandson. So she's talking about the Lawrences. Gotta have this dabbing thing. Didn't have it so much in the junior book, just at the end. To Joe's lively fancy, this fine house seemed a kind of enchanted palace, full of splendors and delights which no one enjoyed. She had long wanted to behold these hidden glories and to know the Lawrence boy who looked as if he would like to be known, if he only knew how to begin. Since the party, she had been more eager than ever and had planned many ways of making friends with him, but he had not been lately seen, and Joe began to think he had gone away, when she one day spied a brown face at an upper window, looking wistfully down into their garden where Beth and Amy were snowballing one another. "That boy is suffering for society and fun," she said to herself. "His grandpa does not know what's good for him and keeps him shut up all alone. He needs a lot of jolly boys to play with, or somebody young and lively. I've a great mind to go over and tell the old gentleman so." The idea amused Joe, who liked to do daring things and was always scandalizing Meg by her queer performances. Reminds me of my mom and her sister. Aunt Frankie was a mess and got in trouble, and my mama got upset and cried. Aunt Frankie could have cared. The plan of going over was not forgotten, and when the snowy afternoon came, Joe resolved to try what could be done. She saw Mr. Lawrence drive off and then sallied out to dig her way down to the hedge, where she paused and took a survey. All quiet, curtains down at the lower windows, servants out of sight, and nothing human visible but a curly black head leaning on a thin hand at the upper window. "There he is," thought Joe. "Poor boy, all alone and sick this dismal day. It's a shame. I'll toss up a snowball and make him look out, and then say a kind word to him." Up went a handful of soft snow, and the head turned at once, showing a face which lost its listless look in a minute. As the big eyes brightened and the mouth began to smile, Joe nodded and laughed and flourished her broom as she called out, "How do you do? Are you sick?" Laurie opened the window and croaked out as hoarsely as a raven, "Better, thank you. I've had a horrid cold and been shut up a week." "I'm sorry. What do you do to amuse yourself with?" "Nothing. It's as dull as a tomb up here." "Don't you read?" "Not much. They won't let me." "Can't somebody read to you?" "Grandpa does sometimes, but my books don't interest him, and I hate to ask Brooke all the time." "Have someone come and see you then." "There isn't anyone I'd like to see. Boys make such a row, and my head is weak." "Isn't there some nice girl who'd read and amuse you? Girls are quiet and like to play nurse." "Don't know any." "You know me," began Joe, then laughed and stopped. "So I do." "Will you come, please?" cried Laurie. "I'm not quite nice, but I'll come, if Mother will let me. I'll go ask her. Shut that window like a good boy and wait till I come." With that, Joe shouldered her broom and marched into the house, wondering what they would all say to her. Laurie was in a flutter of excitement at the idea of having company and flew about to get ready, for, as Mrs. March said, he was a little gentleman, and did honor to the coming guest by brushing his curly pate, putting on a fresh collar, and trying to tidy up the room, which, in spite of half a dozen servants, was anything but neat. Presently there came a loud ring, then a decided voice asking for Mr. Laurie, and a surprised-looking servant came running up to announce a young lady. All right, show her up. It's Miss Joe, said Laurie, going to the door of his little parlor to meet Joe, who appeared, looking rosy and kind and quite at ease, with a covered dish in one hand and Beth's 3 kittens in the other. Here I am, bag and baggage, she said briskly. Mother sent her love and was glad if I could do anything for you. Meg wanted me to bring some of her blonde. I had a British twins of one of my students, and they told me how to say this, and now I can't remember. Blanc, which means white, doesn't it, in French? Mange, blancmange, maybe. It's BLANC hyphen MANGE. Looks like blank mange. Blancmange. Sounds better, doesn't it? I think it's a cake. Michelle will let us know. She makes it very nice, and Beth thought her cats would be comforting. I knew you'd shout at them, but I couldn't refuse. She was so anxious to do something. It so happened that Beth's funny loan was just the thing, for in laughing over the kittens, Laurie forgot his bashfulness and grew sociable at once. That looks too pretty to eat, he said, smiling with pleasure as Joe uncovered the dish and showed the blancmange, surrounded by a garland of green leaves and the scarlet flowers of Amy's pet geranium. Well, maybe, I don't know what it is. It isn't anything, only they all felt kindly and wanted to show it. Tell the girl to put it away for your tea. It's so simple, you can eat it, and being soft, it will slip down without hurting your sore throat. What a cozy room this is. Some kind of cake. It might be, if it keeps nice, but the maids are lazy, and I don't know how to make them mine. It worries me, though. I'll write it up in 2 minutes, for it only needs to have the hearth brushed, so... And the things stood straight on the mantelpiece, so... And the books put here, and the bottles there, and your sofa turned from the light, and the pillows plumped up a bit. Now then, you're fixed. And so he was. For as she laughed and talked, Joe had whisked things into place and given quite a different air to the room. Laurie watched her in respectful silence, and when she beckoned him to his sofa, he sat down with a sigh of satisfaction, saying gratefully, "How kind you are." Yes, that's what it wanted. Now please take the big chair and let me do something to amuse my company. No, I came to amuse you. Shall I read aloud? And Joe looked affectionately toward some inviting books nearby. Thank you, I've read all those, and if you don't mind, I'd rather talk, answered Laurie. Not a bit. I'll talk all day if you'll only set me going. Beth says I never know when to stop. Is Beth the rosy one who stays at home a good deal and sometimes goes out with a little basket? Asked Laurie with interest. Yes, that's Beth. She's my girl, and a regular good one she is, too. The pretty one is Meg. That's the oldest one, Margaret. And the curly-haired one is Amy, I believe. How did you find that out? Laurie colored up. Red, blushed, but answered frankly, why, you see, I often hear you calling to one another, and when I'm alone up here, I can't help looking over at your house. You always seem to be having such good times. I beg your pardon for being so rude, but sometimes you forget to put down the curtain at the window where the flowers are. And when the lamps are lighted, it's like looking at a picture to see the fire, and you all around the table with your mother. Her face is right opposite. It looks so sweet behind the flowers. I can't help watching it. I haven't got a mother, you know. And Laurie poked the fire to hide a little twitching of the lips that he could not control. The solitary, hungry look in his eyes went straight to Joe's warm heart. She had been so simply taught that there was no nonsense in her head, and at 15, she was as innocent and frank as any child. Laurie was sick and lonely, and feeling how rich she was in home love and happiness, she gladly tried to share it with him. Her brown face was very friendly and her sharp voice unusually gentle as she said, "We'll never draw that curtain any more, and I give you leave to look as much as you like. I just wish, though, instead of peeping, you'd come over and see us. Mother is so splendid, she'd do you heaps of good, and Beth would sing to you if I begged her to, and Amy would dance, and Meg and I would make you laugh over our funny stage properties, and we'd have jolly times. Wouldn't your grandpa let you?" "I think he would if your mother asked him. He's very kind, though he don't look it, and he lets me do what I like pretty much. Only he's afraid I might be a bother to strangers," began Laurie, brightening more and more. "Well, we're not strangers, we're neighbors, and you needn't think you'd be a bother. We want to know you, and I've been trying to do it this ever so long. We haven't been here a great while, you know, but we have got acquainted with our neighbors, but you see, Grandpa lives among," and he's talking now, "Grandpa lives among his books and doesn't mind much what happens outside. Mr. Brooke, my tutor, doesn't stay here, you know, and I've no one to go around with me, so I just stop at home and get on as I can." "That's bad. You ought to take a dive and go visiting everywhere you're asked. Then you'll have lots of friends and pleasant places to go. Never mind being bashful. It won't last long if you keep going." Laurie turned red again, but wasn't offended at being accused of bashfulness, for there was so much goodwill in Joe. It was impossible not to take her blunt speeches as kindly as they were meant. "Do you like your school?" asked the boy, changing the subject, after a little pause during which he stared at the fire, and Joe looked about her well pleased. "Don't go to school. I'm a businessman girl, I mean. I go to wait on my aunt, and a dear cross old soul she is, too," answered Joe. Laurie opened his mouth to ask another question, but remembering just in time that it wasn't manners to make too many inquiries into people's affairs, he shut it again and looked uncomfortable. Joe liked his good breeding and didn't mind having a laugh at Aunt March, so she gave him a lively description of the fidgety old lady, her fat poodle, the parrot that talked Spanish, and the library where she reveled. Laurie enjoyed that immensely, and when she told about the prim old gentleman who came once to woo Aunt March, and in the middle of a fine speech how Poll, P-O-L-L, had tweaked his wig off to his great dismay. So a man came courting named Poll, and his wig fell off. The boy lay back and laughed till the tears ran down his cheeks, and a maid popped her head in to see what was the matter. "Oh, that does me lots of good. Tell on, please," he said, taking his face out of the sofa cushion, red and shining with merriment. Much elated with her success, Joe did tell on all about their plays and plans, their hopes and fears for father, and the most interesting events of the little world in which the sisters lived. Then they got to talking about books, and to Joe's delight, she found that Laurie loved them as well as she did, and had read even more than herself. "If you like them so much, come down and see ours." "Grandpa is out, so you needn't be afraid," said Laurie, getting up. "I'm not afraid of anything," returned Joe with a toss of the head. I don't believe you are," exclaimed the boy, looking at her with much admiration, though he privately thought she would have good reason to be a trifle afraid of the old gentleman if she met him in some of his moods. The atmosphere of the whole house being summer-like, Laurie led the way from room to room, letting Joe stop to examine whatever struck her fancy, and so at last they came to the library, where she clapped her hands and pranced as she always did when especially delighted. It was lined with books, and there were pictures and statues and distracting little cabinets full of coins and curiosities and Sleepy Hollow chairs and that's a great book, and queer tables and bronzes, and best of all, a great open fireplace with quaint tiles all around it. What richness, sighed Joe, sinking into the depths of a velvet chair. I've always wanted to live, or used to when I was a kid. I think it'd be great to live in a great big old house, you know, with all the nooks and crannies and a music room and a library and all that. My heavenly home. This suits me just fine for right now. Let's see. Theodore Lawrence, you ought to be the happiest boy in the world, she added impressively. A fella can't live on books, said Laurie, shaking his head as he perched on a table opposite. Before he could say any more, a bell rung, and Joe flew up, exclaiming with alarm, "Mercy me, it's your grandpa." "Well, what if it is? You're not afraid of anything, you know," returned the boy, looking wicked. "I think I am a little bit afraid of him, but I don't know why I should be. Marmee said I might come, and I don't think you're any the worse for it," said Joe, composing herself, though she kept her eyes on the door. "I'm a great deal better for it, and ever so much obliged. I'm only afraid you're very tired talking to me. It was so pleasant, I couldn't bear to stop," said Laurie gratefully. "The doctor to see you, sir," said the maid, beckoned as she spoke. "Would you mind if I left you for a minute? I suppose I must see him," said Laurie. "Don't mind me, I'm as happy as a cricket here," answered Joe. Kind of reminds you of the secret garden, doesn't it, a little bit? How Mary made Colin happy. She seems to be making Laurie happy. Laurie went away, and his guest amused herself in her own way. She was standing before a fine portrait of the old gentleman when the door opened again, and without turning, she said decidedly, "I'm sure now that I shouldn't be afraid of him, for he's got kind eyes, though his mouth is grim, and he looks as if he had a tremendous will of his own. He isn't as handsome as my grandfather, but I like him. What do you think?" "Thank you, ma'am," said a gruff voice behind her, and there, to her great dismay, stood old Mr. Lawrence. Poor Joe blushed till she couldn't blush any redder, and her heart began to beat uncomfortably fast as she thought what she had said. For a minute, a wild desire to run away possessed her, but that was cowardly, and the girls would laugh at her, so she resolved to stay and get out of the scrape if she could. A second look showed her that the living eyes under the bushy gray eyebrows were kinder even than the painted ones, and there was a sly twinkle in them which lessened her fear a good deal. The gruff voice was gruffer than ever as the old gentleman said abruptly after that dreadful pause, "So you're not afraid of me, eh?" "Not much, sir." "And you don't think me as handsome as your grandfather?" "Not quite, sir." "And I've got a tremendous will, have I?" "I only said I thought so." "But you like me in spite of it?" "Yes, I do, sir." That answer pleased the old gentleman. He gave a short laugh, shook hands with her, and putting his fingers under her chin, turned up her face, examined it gravely, and let it go, saying with a nod, "You got your grandfather's spirit if you haven't his face. He was a fine man, my dear, but what is better, he was a brave and honest one, and I was proud to be his friend." "Thank you, sir," said Joe. And Joe was quite comfortable after that, for it suited her exactly. "What have you been doing to this boy of mine, eh?" was the next question sharply put. "Only trying to be neighborly, sir," and Joe told how her visit came about. "You think he needs cheering up a bit, do you?" "Yes, sir, he seems a little lonely, and young folks would do him good, perhaps. We're only girls, but we should be glad to help if we could, for we don't forget the splendid Christmas present you sent us," said Joe eagerly. Remember the sort of the banquet he sent? "Tut, tut, tut, that was the boy's affair. How is the poor woman?" "Doing nicely, sir," and off went Joe, talking very fast as she told all about the Hummels, in whom her mother had interested richer friends than they were. Just her father's way of doing good. I shall come and see your mother some fine day. Tell her so. There's the tea bell. We have it early on the boys' account. Come down and go on being neighborly. If you'd like to have me, sir. Shouldn't ask you if I didn't, said Mr. Lawrence, offered her his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. What would Meg say to this, thought Joe as she was marched away, while her eyes danced with fun as she imagined herself telling the story at home. Hey, why, what the dickens has come to the fellow, said the old gentleman as Laurie came running downstairs and brought up with a start of surprise at the astonishing sight of Joe in arm with his redoubtable grandfather. I didn't know you'd come, sir, he began as Joe gave him a triumphant little glance. That's evident by the way you racket downstairs. Come to your tea, sir, and behave like a gentleman. And having pulled the boy's hair by way of caress, Mr. Lawrence walked on, while Laurie went through a series of comic evolutions behind their backs, which nearly produced an explosion of laughter from Joe. The old gentleman did not say much as he drank his 4 cups of tea, but he watched the young people, who soon chatted away like old friends, and the change in his grandson did not escape him. There was color, light, and life in the boy's face now, vivacity in his manner, and genuine merriment in his laugh. She's right, the lad is lonely. I'll see what these little girls can do for him, thought Mr. Lawrence as he looked and listened. He liked Joe, for her odd, blunt ways suited him, and she seemed to understand the boy almost as well as if she'd been one herself. If the Lawrences had been what Joe called prim and pokey, instead of prim and proper, she would not have got on at all, for such people always made her shy and awkward. But finding them free and easy, she was so herself. Whew. I've had to give out, guys. I think I'm going to have to stop there. We don't have much more left. Whew. I'm praying. It's a good chapter, though, isn't it? Oh, mercy me. Okay, let's see. I've been putting the titles because I don't think they have chapter numbers. Yeah, they do. Chapter 5, being neighborly. So this will be part 1. And we don't have very much at all to go on part 2, but I'm just giving out. All right, guys. I'm looking forward to tomorrow, getting to talk to you guys and show you some things and have a happy meal to open and a little shopping. Some of y'all saw that video. I need my manager. I tried to put music on the silent part. I had a message. No. My alarm clock went off while I was in Michael's. And I guess in taking it off, somehow the sound went off. I didn't press a button, I just slid it out of the way, but I guess. But boy, I was just talking to y'all. I don't care what people, if they're around, I'll start talking to them too, and then mention I have a channel or whatever. But yeah, y'all saw what I was getting at. But yeah, then I tried to put music on, and I thought I had. It was on a second or two. Manager, I need you. I need some technical help. I kept trying to. I went to the edit thing, the creator studio, whatever. I just need help. Anyway, it hasn't been a bad day. It's just been a thoughtful, prayerful, somber day. And it needed to be that way. And I'm sure a lot of you, like I say, have been like that. And I don't know, it happened in, 2001? I can't remember. Shoot, I can't remember the dates, but of course I did know this one, but I didn't know that it was 9/11 until it was brought to my attention by watching other videos. But anyway, it's good to reflect sometimes. Just anyway, watch the other, at least the beginning of the Junior Squirrel Squad. I talk about it just a little bit, just my thoughts on stuff. So proud to be an American, aren't we? And I love having our Canadian friends, friends across the pond, friends everywhere. Love to you all, Squirrel Squad. Mwah. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. Tomorrow at 5. See you then.